hearing, Dennis?
Yes.
Good talk here.
I can't stand the Welsh language.
I'm not well. I speak English.
I don't think I need really introduced, actually, as basis to relate to most of us. I think we've heard say a few words in the past, but today is going to be an exception. This is going to be a brilliant talk. Every 5 minutes I'm going to ring that bell because I don't want anybody to fall asleep because if they do, they're going to miss a marvellous talk. Anyway, no further introduction. Natalie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you all very much for inviting me to talk to you about humanism. There are 3 things I don't like about England. I don't like the dark days of winter. There's nothing you can do about that. I don't like the fact that it is not considered polite to talk about sex, politics, or religion. I will be talking about all 3 topics. The third thing I don't like is English tact. You are, on the whole, reluctant to tell people when you think that they are talking absolute nonsense. Today I will be expressing views with which you might well disagree. My views might well be wrong, but if nobody challenges them, I will probably never change them. I will expect everyone here who does not challenge what I say to come and ask me afterwards how they can join the humanists. When I'm asked to define humanism, I usually say, humanists are people who are very interested in morality, but who say that one cannot refer to the authority of holy books when making decisions about the correct way to behave. Note that I'm not saying that one cannot use holy books as a source of ideas. The people who wrote the various holy texts were also interested in how people should act. It is always worthwhile listening to what they have to say, but one should always think about what they claim and then possibly disagree with their conclusions. Here are some examples of questions where people have referred to their holy texts in order to justify their views. How should rulers be chosen? What are the rights of rulers over their subjects? What are the duties of ordinary people towards their rulers? How should wars be conducted and how should enemies be treated? In particular, are the women and children of enemies to be regarded as being freely available as sexual objects? Outside war, holy texts have quite a lot to say about sex. Who can marry who? Who decides on marriage partners? Parents or the individuals concerned? Can you have rape within marriage? What do you do about rape within the family group, rape within the community, and rape by people outside your community? How about divorce? What about contraception and abortion? When it comes to religion, how should one react to people who do not share one's faith? All of these are questions where I could find people who would start their answer by saying, we know the answer because our holy text says blah, blah, blah. Humanists cannot start their answers by saying, we know the answer because our holy text says. We have to do it a different way.
Hello.
I'm going to read you a satirical letter which will show that Jews and Christians do, in real life, actually use the Bible simply as a resource. I've asked the Association of British Muslims if there are similar satires about the Quran, but their director has not been able to find any. On the other hand, I do know that he thinks that the mullahs do get things wrong about quite a lot of issues. First, some background to the letter I'm going to read. Dr. Laura Schlesinger is an American physiologist who had a radio program dispensing advice to callers. In the year 2000, she was an Orthodox Jewess. In 2003, she renounced that faith. She often aired her opinion that homosexuals are a mistake of nature deviance, and biological errors. Then in the year 2000, the state of Vermont legalized civil partnerships between homosexuals. Shortly after that, the following letter appeared on the internet. It reappears at regular intervals. A version of it has been addressed to George W. Bush. And here's the original. Dear Dr. Laura, thank you for doing so much to educate people regarding God's law. I have learned a great deal from your show, and I try to share that knowledge with as many people as I can. When someone tries to defend the homosexual lifestyle, for example, I simply remind them that Leviticus 18:22 clearly states it to be an abomination. End of debate. I do need some advice from you, however, regarding some of the specific laws and how to best follow them. When I burn a bull on the altar as a sacrifice, I know it creates a pleasing odor for the Lord, Leviticus 1:9. The problem is my neighbors. They claim the odor is not pleasing to them. Should I smite them? I would like to sell my daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. In this day and age, what do you think would be a fair price for her?
2 camels.
I know that I am allowed no contact with a woman while she is in her period of menstrual uncleanliness. Leviticus 15, verses 19 to 24. The problem is, how do I tell? I've tried asking, but most women take offense. Leviticus 25:44 states that I may indeed possess slaves, both male and female, provided that they are purchased from neighboring nations. A friend of mine claims that this applies to Mexicans but not Canadians. Can you clarify why can't I own Canadians? I have a neighbor who insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly states he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself? A friend of mine feels that even though eating shellfish is an abomination, Leviticus 11:10, it is a lesser abomination than homosexuality. I don't agree. Can you settle this? Leviticus 21:20 states that I may not approach the altar of God if I have a defect in my sight. I have to admit that I wear reading glasses. Does my vision have to be 20/20, or is there some wiggle room here? Most of my male friends get their hair trimmed, including the hair around their temples, even though this is expressly forbidden by Leviticus 19:27. How should they die? I know that Leviticus 11:6-8, I know from those, that touching the skin of a dead pig makes me unclean. But may I still play football if I wear gloves? My uncle has a farm. He violates Leviticus 19:19 by planting 2 different crops in the same field, as does my wife by wearing garments made of 2 different kinds of thread, cotton polyester blend. He also tends to curse and blaspheme a lot. Is it really necessary that we go to all the trouble of getting the whole town together to stone them? Leviticus 24, verses 10-16. Couldn't we just burn them to death at a private family affair, like we do with people who sleep with their in-laws? Leviticus 20, verse 14. I know you have studied these things extensively, so I am confident that you can help me. Thank you again for reminding us that God's word is eternal and unchanging, your devoted disciple and adoring fan. That's the end of the letter that went round. You can still find it on the internet if you Google abominations. Because humanists don't have a holy text or a leader whose words they regard as sacrosanct, it is actually impossible to say about any issue that such and such is the humanist view. When it comes to questions, I will of course give you my opinion, and I also may be able to say what some other humanists think, but there is no official humanist think blog. While you're thinking of questions, I'll discuss the most common question asked of humanists. It is, if morality does not come from God, then where does it come from? You will all have heard of Richard Dawkins and his book, The God Delusion. I haven't read The God Delusion, and I don't intend reading it. If I am going to read anything, I'll read people who disagree with my present views. After all, as I said earlier, I might well be wrong. But I have read Richard Dawkins' most important book. It's a book on biology called The Selfish Gene. In it, he expands on Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest to say that it is not the fittest individuals who survive, but the fittest genes in each species. The animal kingdom is full of examples where individual animals act in ways which benefit their children or near relatives rather than themselves. In some species, only the strongest males breed. The less strong don't breed, so the species as a whole keeps the best genes. Other species go further, and only the alpha male and alpha female breed, with the rest of the group providing help in raising the children, who are all their near relatives. Think back on our history as a species. We started off as hunters. Half a dozen people hunting together will be far more than 6 times as effective as a single hunter. Early man would naturally form into groups of relatives, and if you're hunting alongside your brother and you suddenly feel tired, you're going to persevere. You're not going to let your brother down by deciding to have a rest. Similarly, if a sister or brother dies leaving children, for your genes to survive, you will look after their children. For societies to survive, we have to act altruistically. Over time, family groups formed tribes and nations. People also grouped themselves according to their religious beliefs. If you read what historians or anthropologists say, you will find statements like, the ancient Egyptians believed something or other. You won't read, some ancient Egyptians believed this, other ancient Egyptians believed that. Nations and tribes appear to have had only a single belief. So when the religious leaders decided what sort of behavior would enable their group to survive, there was no conflict between religious and secular ideas. Things are a bit more complicated now, where the only monolithic societies in that sense are probably the Middle East countries, which have made life so difficult for Christians and Jews that they are purely Muslim. All other countries have mixed groups. Early moral decisions were concerned with the survival of small groups. Thus, almost every society decided that it is immoral to steal from one's own group or to murder people within one's own group. But in the Bible, Deuteronomy 20 gives different instructions about how to behave when other groups are involved. I'm now quoting from the New International Version of the Bible. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women and children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves. You may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. However, in the cities of the nations that the Lord has given you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes. Completely destroy them, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do, in worshipping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. That was some advice as to how to deal with people who disagree with your faith. When you lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees by putting an axe to them, because you can eat their fruit. Do not cut them down. Are the trees people that you should besiege them? However, you may cut down trees that you know are not fruit trees, and use them to build siege works until the city at war with you falls. We now realize, in the biblical quote, we now realize that we have the ability to completely destroy our own species. In the 20th century, the United Nations and the Geneva Convention made a serious attempt to redefine what behavior is moral and correct during conflicts and what is immoral. It is easy to interpret the morality implicit in an organization like the UN or in an organization like Rotary as being examples of Richard Dawkins' idea that moral behavior is behavior which aids the survival of our species. Thus, even though many individual Rotarians may feel that they are acting out of religious motives, one only has to look at Rotary initiatives like the shelter boxes sent to disaster areas to realize that Rotary is a humanist organization. Thank you. I will now take any questions if anybody has it.
That Leviticus sounds interesting. Where can we get one?
Well, I would suggest, what, you want to know the actual quotes for the letter to Dr. Laura?
Fun.
Well, what do you want, a slave?
Yeah. All the sexy bits.
All the sexy bits.
Yeah.
I know somebody who has written a skeptic's annotation to the Bible, and I got an email from him the other day which dealt with all the sexy bits. If you're very, very, very nice to me, I will pass that one on.
Rephrase that.
He's done the sexy bits from the Bible, the Quran, and the Book of Mormon. He's an American, so the Book of Mormon has quite a...
Have I got enough years left to go through that?
He's done all the hard work for you. He's just gives you the extracts.
Oh,
You don't have to. You don't have to read the whole thing.
Right. Natalie, thank you very much. Very entertaining and truly thought-provoking. But you put us in a quandary. You put us into the brackets of humans. So how can I challenge you?
Well, no, you can tell me whatever you think.
The most interesting thing is, in one of the observations that I have is, in all, throughout the world, I'm sure, the religious texts that have evolved or come down to us
Yes.
have been at a certain time period in a certain form of thinking, and perhaps applicable to that period, however far back in history it may be. And as societies have evolved over the years, the interpretations are what we are now faced with, right or wrong. That is not the question. The question is the interpretation. And the classic example is the use of moral and religious diktats by authoritarian societies, or governments if you want to call them, to further their own little agendas. And when that is brought into play, it completely mixes up what the old texts have been telling us and what modern thinking is sort of playing against.
That is my point, that in practice, people take from the texts what they want. They use it as a resource. But when it suits them, you will have here, and it's not difficult to find people saying that, oh, we cannot have civil partnership in this country because it is against such and such biblical texts. We have, perhaps, on the Quran, you cannot have rape within marriage because such and such a text says that a man has a right to have sex with his wife at any time. It becomes a legal thing. So certain people do pick out the bits that suit them, and I am saying that's fine. Look at the bits, look at what the religious texts say. People have thought about it. They think, is this idea a good idea or isn't it a good idea? And then decide whether you are going to keep it. Of course, obviously, governments, leaders of all sorts want to say, these are the bits that suit us. But, the first time I ever heard of Richard Dawkins was when I picked up the Daily Telegraph. I was new to this country, and there was an article by a man called Clifford Longley, who was the religious correspondent of the Daily Telegraph. He is a religious Catholic, and he was accusing Richard Dawkins, this man I'd never heard of being naive. He said, Richard Dawkins acts as if the religious leaders actually believe what the religious leaders say they believe. He says, their beliefs are much more sophisticated than they feel that they could tell their congregations. And Richard Dawkins is absolutely naive if he thinks that they actually really all believe in, say, the virgin birth or whatever. This was my introduction to religion in Britain, basically, that perhaps the religious leaders, the Archbishop of Canterbury, might not actually believe what the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Archbishop of York say in public.
There's a possibility.
There's a possibility.
No, there is a distinct possibility on that score.
That's right.
My apologies.
I was not aware of what you just said about a Muslim marriage. I think that's going to be very difficult to get it passed through my wife.
Don't go to Pakistan.
No.
The Pakistani parliament is passing a rule to say that a law on the subject. I can send you a reference.
Well, I don't know about Pakistan, but I come
Yes.
from a Muslim society. In my country, Bangladesh,
Yes.
at least 95% of Muslims. I think these mullahs are outcasts who are still professing things like that. Educated society is coming up.
Right.
You see, educated women will just not have it. You can put it in any way you like. They are not just going to have it. They'll throw the men out. As simple as that.
Oh, what? But you've still got the authorities. I can still, find you people easily. I actually get quite a lot of this from the president of the Association of British Muslims, who is saying that really, as a society, he's Pakistani. He says we Pakistanis must take responsibility and get rid of these people who are talking nonsense.
That's
in
right.
the name of our religion.
That is
But-
abuse of the religion.
That's right. So there certainly is. I'm pleased to see that there still are people who are fighting against his point of view. He was coming down to speak in London, and there were people on his Facebook were saying, aren't you scared to come down here? Aren't you worried that you're going to be attacked? He said, look, I've got to say what I believe, or am I a man or am I a mouse?
Mr. President, I'm disappointed, Natalie.
Why?
The talk and the discussion so far have been entirely negative.
Yes, yeah.
We can easily take, you can go through Leviticus at great length and make mock of the proliferation of Hebrew Jewish laws. But can you explain to me, I'm a very easygoing, regular communicative member of the Church of England.
Yes.
I don't ram it down in anybody's throat.
No.
To hear the way I behave and speak at certain times, you wouldn't believe it. As William Booth said, in religion, we don't want virtuous people, we're looking for sinners. Now, I can tell you that from my easygoing approach to religion, I gain a great deal of comfort and strength and even guidance from it. I think I do try to live by the precepts that our founder enunciated. Can you tell me? Can you tell me what? And I say things that I believe every Sunday. I honestly can't say that I believe all of them, or I believe my own version of some of them. Can you tell me what humanists believe? Because so far I haven't heard a single thing.
I told you that
you said.
I can't, because on any particular matter it is up for debate. So you might say, we as a humanist group debated, should abortion be allowed? Should women be allowed to have an abortion? Now, the group in Havering, meeting at that day, the majority of people felt that, considering the arguments, that it should be a woman's choice. But our president absolutely disagreed, and we don't have to have a consensus of opinion. But it was a subject that was open for discussion. You discuss it, you hear other people's point of view, and you come to your own conclusion about anything. So about any issue. Now, I'm sure that most humanists, I think you'd be hard put to find a humanist who thinks that murder is a good idea. But on the other hand, if you then broaden it to what do you do in a war situation, what do you do with people who are threatening your society, you will find the whole broad spectrum of opinions. But what they will say is we cannot look to any bit of the holy text except to see what other people have thought about it in the past. So we can take the commandment not to, one of the 10, not to murder. We could take the other bits to, or look at how religious leaders look at crusades, look at various things, and say what was their purpose? Do we believe? Do we think they are right or wrong? And you can't. You've got to make up your own mind. There is no such thing. So it's a.
You may ask a supplementary question.
Yes, of course you may. We list. Because I am a humanist, you may ask as many questions as you like.
In our church,
Yes.
we sometimes have to receive and meet and help, if we can, people who have been cast down into a tremendous depth of suffering.
Yes.
A mother who has lost her 5-year-old child.
Yes.
Someone whose elderly grandmother has been beaten to death, someone who's watching her father die of cancer. What would a humanist say about that? Discuss it?
No,
have our views?
No, the humanists say that you would help them because it is the right thing to do.
How? How do you decide that?
Simply because you feel for other people. You are not doing it because God tells you to do it, because then you've got to ask. But you could make the argument that shelter boxes are blasphemous. If God wanted to send a tsunami to destroy a whole lot of people, perhaps by intervening and sending shelter boxes to prevent death, perhaps we are thwarting God's will. Now, I would find that an extremely unacceptable argument. You help because you can, because you're a human.
So if you don't see the relevance of what you said.
No. If you're going to do things, if I leave my bag here and you don't, I trust that you wouldn't go to it and nick the money out of my purse. Would you?
I'd need the money first and then find out who it belongs.
I refuse to believe that anybody who says, oh, I act the way I do because of my faith. I absolutely refuse to believe that if they lost their faith, that I could then no longer trust any of you to not nick my purse, to stab me in the back or something just because you feel like it. I would expect every single one of you that even if, no matter what your present faith is and what it becomes, because you are all nice people, you would behave properly. And so humanism is basic. Really, there is no set of particular beliefs. I think you will find that most humanists are agnostic when it comes to deciding, is there a God? They say, define your God, and I'll tell you whether I believe in that particular concept of a deity. But you don't have to. There are quite a few humanists who are Buddhists. Buddhism is absolutely not incompatible with being a humanist. In fact, one of the chaps who used to teach at Ravensbourne was both a Buddhist and a humanist. So there's nothing incompatible, and there's no problem with any of that. He's a nice fella, he did the right thing, and he did the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. So you still feel that you know, anything nice that you do because you are you're trying to emulate Jesus, or not? Or don't you?
No, I do it without thinking. I mean, it's a natural thing to do.
I wish I was Brian Taps,
I know, can go on.
because Brian Taps is going to give the vote of thanks. I think it's been a great speech. I think the questions are really thought-provoking and could go on and on and on, but we have to finish sometime. So Brian, I'm going to hand over to you to say the vote of thanks.
Not more than half an hour, Brian. Well said, Brian.
Well, when I first joined Rotary many years ago, I was told by a very senior member that two things we didn't discuss in Rotary were politics and religion.
That's right.
Sex wasn't mentioned, I hate to add.
You had a naughty boys club, don't believe it. So
I hadn't joined then.
Having sat and listened very carefully to Natalie, perhaps I can see why, though. The sort of debate that can go on, you know. I don't know what to say to all that, really. I'm not a particularly religious person, having been brought up, I suppose, the Church of England, as most of us were, you know, my day. We have certain beliefs, I think. 90% we probably don't take much notice of. That makes me a humanist, I don't know. I don't really have to make judgment on what you've been saying. I think I need to do a lot of discussion on that. But I also tend to agree with John. I think the root of it all is that you're able to offer something. If you have a religion, of whatever faith it is, it has something in foundation which you're able to attach to and use. With respect, humanists seem to just have a chat. And, that's about it. So, from my point of view, I find it a little difficult. I'm sure you'd be very happy to come and tell us all about it again. But I would say thank you very much. It was very stimulating. I haven't seen John get up on his feet for such a long time.
I'm exhausted.
So that's on behalf of thank you.
And
the debate will go on and on and on, and Natalie is here to talk to you for the rest of the afternoon.
Have you thought about that?
We can discuss that.
Okay, is there any other business before we conclude? No, in which case...